Well, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but the least I can do is comb my hair. So I'll do that and be right back. Oh, that's better. Let me turn on some more lights so I don't look like death warmed over. This is not a very good picture for Halloween, or maybe it is. Okay, well that's a little better. Uh anyway, if any of you have ever wondered what the pictures are in the background, uh, these three pictures over here, everything runs backwards. Up here and here and here. That's those were shot in 1969 in Turkey, where I was stationed while in the Air Force. This is also the place that we were at when the uh, coup broke out in Turkey in June of '69, and our position there was uh, taken by the opposing forces, and we were held there for 32 days at gunpoint. We had one of our comrades who was shot to death, and another beaten to the point I don't know whether he even survived or not. They finally got him out and sent him to Germany for hospitalization, but I don't know what the outcome of that was. But anyway, fun and games in the Middle East. Although in Turkey they don't like to be referred to as the Middle East. Uh, Interesting country to which I never wish to return. Okay, enough personal commentary. Um, to carry on with the growing up in the 50s and 60s, um, to show you how strange things were back then, uh, and how much freedom we kids had. When I was I was probably in the sixth grade, I guess. After school, I would walk on way to the other side of town. That was a good walk over to that store on the outskirts of town, and then back home was probably a good 2 mile trek. And the reason I made that trip was I would go to that store, uh, which was run by an Asian uh, uh, couple, uh, which may explain why they were so far out of town. I don't know. Um, at any rate, I go over there and I could buy I could buy black gunpowder. Uh, I got my first rifle for my 10th birthday. Uh, my uncle, who would take me hunting regularly, let me fire his 12 gauge shotgun when I was about the same age. It was different back then. Rural area. We had about 250 acres of wide open forest land that was not posted for no trespass. So we would go in there and hunt. Uh, but anyway, back to the black powder story. Uh, I had taken a iron pipe, put an end cap on it, drilled and countersunk a hole toward the back of it. Now remember, I'm in sixth grade, right? And so what I was doing is building a cannon. Um, well, the most challenging part of it was what was I going to use for a fuse. I wasn't going to stand there and touch that thing off, being close to it, which was a pretty intelligent thing for a 6 year old. I mean, for a sixth grader. And So anyway, I discovered that you could take steel wool and stretch it out, and if you lit it, it would glow and burn slowly, and so it made a great fuse. So anyway, I'd take a cap full of that black powder, put it down into the pipe, shake it down, and then I would put in a rock, ball bearing, whatever I could find as a projectile. And then I would put a little bit of powder on that countersunk hole that I drilled, and then use the steel wool, stretch it out, and I'd use that as a fuse. That'd give me plenty of time to run. uh, I don't guess I conceived of how dangerous that really was. I mean, if I put too much powder in there, the pipe could have exploded. Uh, so, anyway, nowadays, if you did something like that, you'd have the uh, law enforcement authorities on your case. But at any rate, I would use that to shoot at trees and whatever. A lot of fun. Also, I'd use that black powder to make some of my own fireworks. Also, very dangerous. None of this is recommended, by the way. Any kids watching this was stuff I'm lucky to have survived. Uh, if you tried it today, you'd certainly go to jail if you didn't die. Anyway, that's the way it was back then. But it was rural. I mean, rural area. You know, we weren't living in a city packed close together, so we could go out there and shoot our rifles and stuff with almost no chance of ever creating any damage. Um, and there was plenty of game to hunt back then. So it was interesting times. You know, this would have been in the 50s, late 50s. Uh, I graduated from high school in 1965. So I'm sure it's difficult for you to sort of follow my timeline. It is for me now, so many years later. It sort of all runs together. Um, Back then, elementary school was from first grade to seventh grade. There was no middle school. My seventh grade teacher, Mrs. King, was probably the best teacher I ever had, and did everything the old-fashioned way. Um, by that I mean, you know, you formed a line to go to the cafeteria. I mean, everything was very structured. As I said in an earlier video, we didn't have any bullies. Everything was very polite. Um, and one of the things that's notable, particularly given the attitudes today, is when we got back from lunch, and Miss King taught everything, you know, every subject. She had a rocking chair at the front of the classroom. She'd sit down in that, and she would read either a chapter from the Bible or from her favorite book, which was a book written by Dale Evans, you know, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, about her child who passed away very young from birth defect. I want to say it was My Littlest Angel or something like that. I forgot the title exactly. And above the chalkboard in front of the classroom was um, a ruler, and it had the golden rule written on it: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So that's the kind of atmosphere I grew up in. That's the reason we were able to bring our rifles to school on the school bus, is because of the great respect we were taught for one another. Um, so I miss that. I certainly don't see that in the modern world. Um, anyway, got through the seventh grade, and it was time for high school. Well, ordinarily I would have gone to Stone Mountain High School. But my mother, bless her heart, um, did not want me to go to high school in Stone Mountain. She had been offended by some of the ladies in the garden club. And so she didn't want a kid of hers going to Stone Mountain High School. So, despite the fact that my dad had started a new business and was building a house, uh, and therefore budgets were tight, despite all that, they paid a tuition for me to go to Decatur High School, which was an interesting experience because Decatur High School, their system was very progressive for its day. For example, it was an open campus at lunchtime. You could go where you wanted to eat. And since the high school was located near downtown, there were plenty of places to eat if you wanted to, or you go to the school cafeteria. Another thing that was interesting and uncommon was the fact that they had a smoking area for the students. And by that time in life, I was already smoking some, so that was nice. Well, not really, but back then the dangers of cigarettes was not highly publicized. And my mom and dad both smoked, so it was anyway. That's the kind of school it was, as opposed to the DeKalb County school system, which was very structured. So one year there, the eighth grade at Decatur High School. And sometime during that year, my folks sold the house that my dad had built uh, in Stone Mountain on Valleywood Drive. I mean, on Mountain View Drive, and they bought a place closer to Avondale Estates. And anyway, that put us into the Avondale High School area. And so the next year I went to Avondale High School and spent my rest of my high school days at Avondale High School. And it was a large school. The graduating class was 570 some odd. I'm a member of the baby boom. And so everything was large. It's like watching a python swallowing a big animal. Anyway, um, but also, I guess the most significant thing is I've gotten old enough that I was working with my dad after school. In fact, I actually started that in the seventh grade. And that was probably the best and most educational experience of my entire life. He had started a business which turned out to be pretty successful. And I would, during the school days, I would get on the bus and go up to his store, which was located on Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta, and work with him and then ride back home with him. So that's where I got most of my work ethic from. Dad I've always admired him, still do. He had extreme patience with me. Some of the dumb stunts I pulled would have got me fired any place else, but my dad would grin and bear it and taught me a lot of useful skills. But mainly the fact that, you were given a job and you're expected to finish it. And I enjoyed working with him. So to me, it was just the best of both worlds. And he started me out, I think, at 50 cents an hour, which is a lot more than I was worth. By the time I finished high school, I was making $2 an hour, which was way more than I was worth. Remember, that was back when that was real money. And so by the time I was 13, I was doing bookkeeping for the company. For a fact, when I was 13, my mom and dad went to New York on a buying trip to buy some merchandise for the store. And I was left in charge of the store. We had, I think, 4 employees, in addition to myself and my dad. So I had to do the payroll while they were gone, be sure the place was open and closed. Um, so that was, a good experience for a 13-year-old. Did that for a week. So it's hard to put a value on that. My oldest son is in an enviable position that he's able to take time with his son, who's now going on 3. He's 3. Lose track of time, and spend a lot of time with him. And that's something that you can't put a price tag on. So the time I spent with my dad, I value, and I was really blessed to have that time with him. Of course, the early 60s was really a transition in the South because of the desegregation, which I think the South did a pretty fair job, with the exceptions of some areas, but did a pretty good job of handling that. But it was a big change. And the older folks, my folks' generation, had more trouble with that than people of my generation. We never held the same view of that as they did. But the thing that really changed this country forever, and I felt the direct impact of it, was Vietnam. By the time I was a senior, 1965, I was already into things like drag racing at drag strips and taking flying lessons. Um, so anyway, my point is that I didn't pay enough attention to the next year when I went to college to keep my grade point average high enough to avoid exemption, to keep my exemption from the draft. So when I lost that, I was facing possibly being being drafted, and ending up in a rice paddy in Vietnam. To put that in context, I think the only righteous war we've been in has been World War II. Everything else was fought for either religion or ideology, both of which are a sad thing to die over. At any rate, I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I wanted to avoid that if all possible. But since I had foolishly let my student deferment lapse, here I was. So I began to look at my options. So I figured, well, the best thing to do would be to join the military, try to get some kind of education, and if at all possible, avoid Vietnam. So I took an electronics test with the Air Force and was guaranteed a placement in electronics school. So I joined the Air Force. It was a four-year tour. And the irony of that, of course, is the fact that trying to avoid Vietnam, I ended up as a prisoner of war in the Middle East. Go figure. So at any rate, but the good side of that is I did survive it, and I was given an early out. So after After serving 17 months in the Air Force, I was given a discharge. And but still had all the benefits of having served, which have served me well through the years. But getting back to the impact of the war, that caused such a rift in this country in terms of people who supported and people who did not support the war, that erupted sometimes in violence. I haven't seen anything like that since that until now, with the current political situation we have now, where you got violent mobs storming the Congress building. I mean, boy, isn't that deja vu? And having been through a coup in Turkey, seeing that the video of them assaulting the Capitol building brought back some really terrible memories. And the thing is, I don't think most people who were involved in it even understood what the possible outcome could have been. I mean, I was in Ankara, Turkey when the coup broke out. And I mean, from the time it became visible to me that there was something going on, in 20 minutes or so, the ground was shaking from artillery going off. So, you've heard the expression, be careful what you wish for. Well, those people should be thankful that was put down with as little violence as it was. And hopefully we're going to get things in place to prevent that from ever happening again. Enough politics. I've offended enough people already. Okay, this has gone on for a good while. So I'm going to stop at that. And I don't know what I'll title this one as. It's been sort of rambling, hasn't it? Okay, well, we'll figure that out. Post-production, da-da-da-da. Please subscribe, like, and click on the notifications bell if you wish to see more of these videos. Have a good day.